I'm just going to go over 3 exponent problems that will help you kind of understand exponents a little bit better, I hope. And it's key to kind of remember a few of the rules that we use. If you have a negative exponent, you have to make it positive by finding the inverse or the reciprocal. So my first example here is 1/4 to the power of -1. I have a negative exponent written, so I want to find the reciprocal of the entire term inside the parentheses, because -1 affects the entire parentheses, not just the 1 or just the 4. So what I would do is I would take 1/4 to the power of -1. I would write in the exponents, and I'm going to multiply them out. As you recall, or should recall, if you have an exponent outside of a parentheses, you're multiplying the external exponent with each of the internal exponents for all terms. And we'll see more of that in example 3. So when I multiply it out, I get 1 to the power of -1 over 4 to the power of -1. And what happens? My 1 to the power of -1 is negative, and so is this 4 to the power of -1. I'm going to make them positive by finding the inverse, which basically just means to move them from where they are in the fraction to the other part of the fraction. So this 1 to the -1 is in the numerator. I'm going to move it to the denominator. And the 4 to the -1 is in the denominator. I'm going to move it to the numerator. When it becomes a term in the numerator, it's no longer a negative exponent. It now becomes a positive exponent. And the same with this 1 here. This 1 to the -1 becomes a positive exponent. So when you simplify that, that's just 4 over 1, and you get 4 as your final answer. The super shortcut way of this is knowing that if you have 1/4 to the -1, this -1 exponent means to find the reciprocal. So the reciprocal of 1/4 is really just 4 over 1. You'll get the same answer. For the second problem, it would help for you to remember that if you have terms that have the same base, then you add the exponents. I got -2y to the power of 3 times 5xy to the power of 4. First, I'm going to highlight in yellow the terms with the same base. This y to the power of 3 and this y to the power of 4. Let's highlight the two, knowing that I'm going to have to combine them through multiplication. The other thing you need to know is that because these terms are constants, -2 and +5, I can just multiply them like I would do any other time. So -2 times +5 gives you -10. My y to the power of 3 and y to the power of 4 becomes y to the power of 3 plus 4, and x is just x, because there's nothing for that to combine with. Now let's put it all together. -10 comes down. Y now becomes to the power of 7. X is still alone. As a convention, we write math in alphabetical order. So you should get -10 x y to the power of 7. That should be your final answer. Now, the last problem, which kind of puts many concepts together, we're going to have, in this case, a division or a quotient. My answer is going to be a quotient of two terms with exponents in it. I also have exponents outside of a parentheses. So I'm going to need to make sure that I subtract and that I multiply exponents. So you're subtracting and multiplying exponents because in this problem I have a quotient. This is a quotient. This is a division problem, so your answer is going to be a quotient. This was a quotient, and I have a exponent outside. All right. Don't forget that at some point we're also going to need to move terms from one part to another. So I am actually going to multiply first because I find it personally the most comfortable thing to do. If I take this -2, I'm going to multiply it with each of the terms inside the parentheses. So I'm going to do -2 times -3, -2 times this 1 that's not written out, -2 times, again, this 1 that's not written out. Then on the denominator, -2 times +2, -2 times -1. So when I do the multiplication, I get 4 to the power of -2, a to the power of -2, b to the power of +6, all over a to the power of +2, b to the power of -4. Now that I've done that, I am also going to do something else. I am going to get rid of my negative exponents. Exactly the same way as I did in example 1, where I would take something that has a negative exponent, circle it, and draw an arrow to show that I am going to move it to a different place in the fraction. So the terms I'm going to circle are which terms? Think about it right now. Circle them on your own paper if you can. I'll give you 10 seconds. Alright, you should have circled 4 to the power of -2, a to the power of -2, and b to the power of -4. Because these three terms have negative exponents. So these two negative exponents on top are going to move to the bottom. And this negative exponent on the bottom is going to move to the top. So when I rewrite this, b to the 6th and a squared are going to stay exactly where they are. B to the 6th is going to stay on top. A to the power of 2 is going to stay on bottom. Now I'm going to move this b to the power of 4 to the top, and I can move it anywhere I want, so I'm just going to write it in front. B to the power of 4. This 4 to the power of -2 and a to the power of -2 is now going to be on bottom, so I'm just going to write it again anywhere I want. It doesn't really matter right now what order I put it in. 4 to the power of +2, a to the power of +2. Having done that, I'm just going to have to simplify by adding the exponents of like bases. So my first like base is the b's over here. I'm going to add 6 and 4. And my second like base are the a's over here. So I'm going to add 2 and 2. My final answer is going to be b to the power of 10, because 4 plus 6 equals to 10, over a to the power of 4, because 2 plus 2 is 4. And just because I should simplify any number that I can find a square or a root to, I'm going to multiply out 4 squared to get the number 16. So your final answer is b to the power of 10, 14, b to the power of 10 over 16a to the power of 4. Remember, if you're in the Algebra 2 class tonight, make sure you do your homework, which is to finish the rules for your flip book. And if you want to go ahead and work ahead, you can add those questions in and start working on some of the questions. In fact, I think this is probably on one of the questions you could use. So you have all the examples and all the work written out. It would help a lot.